Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 55, The Return of Money Magic. I've had 3 really great questions on money magic in my email this past week, so it seems like a perfect chance to do another video on this. To the very first person who asked me whether or not they even did the spell correctly, yes, it sounds like you did the money spell correctly, or the resources spell correctly if you prefer the old forms. Why didn't it make you rich overnight? It doesn't work that way, or at least not until you're severely up-portaled with the trained intention and mental focus of, say, Merlin or Gandalf, Rasputin, John Dee, heck, Albus Dumbledore, right? None of whom used resource money magics much, if you'll notice. And I'll explain why later on. But just in general, one spell is not going to result in $1 million showing up in your mailbox tomorrow morning. Not that it can't, just that it usually won't. And that's for 2 main reasons. One, magic takes time. That's the first reason. It takes experience, a honed and focused mind. You can't be glib with magic. In layman's terms, you just aren't nearly as good at this yet as you want to be. And really, that's a wonderful thing in itself. Every great journey, skill set, every pursuit worth undertaking begins with that. And a double lumpful of curiosity. So it's a good thing that you aren't there yet. And 2, you don't actually believe $1 million should or can show up. So that's the second reason. You don't think it can happen without seeming causation, that it'll just arrive in your mailbox tomorrow morning. Not really, not subconsciously as a pivotal part of your reality matrix. OS, your operating system, if there are still people out there who don't know what OS in a computer is. My point is, the universe literally cannot manifest what your program doesn't allow it to, because you are the center of your paradigm. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. For one, believing in what the majority of humanity would call impossible, although wonderfully, rapturously rebellious, and often simply downright true, right? What other people think is impossible for an occultist is usually just how it is. But it does tend to set the occultist at odds with the functioning reality schema of all other individuals in their environment. And by environment, I mean the masses, the whole world for the most part, except for the handful of balanced, insightfully mindful truth seekers who are also occultists in their own ways and so would understand where you're coming from, perhaps. But usually everyone is going to think that you're just eccentric, bizarre, even crazy, right? And they're going to think that other people who think the way you do are just as crazy as you, which is one very good reason to keep quiet about the occult and its lessons to you, because they're meant only for you, right? So keep quiet about them in public places when surrounded by other minds that might not be as adept as yours yet. Long story short, not rewriting your core subconscious to be so out of step with everything that surrounds you to where you can't function without everyone perceiving you as insane, that's usually a good thing that you can't get there. It certainly helps to be able to at least communicate with others in a meaningful way, no matter how far you've progressed in the occult. If you want to be able to continue to get actual things done on this plane of existence, having everyone think you're crazy doesn't help with that. So not being able to convince yourself of seemingly impossible things isn't always the worst thing in the world. So keep quiet or don't shift from the common meridian so far as to lose your ability to interact usefully. At least don't shift there until you know how to tether yourself to return and keep both frames of reference workable, right? That's what I advise. Feel free to be downright seemingly what other people would call nuts, right? And other possibly far more meaningful realities in private. But again, I would not advise redirecting your own subconscious, your own internal mind in such drastic ways that you risk losing yourself or your sense of reality. So the fact that you subconsciously don't think $1 million is going to show up tomorrow without a reason isn't necessarily a bad thing. Certainly not early on in your training anyway. Think when Professor X threatens Wolverine in the X-Men movies, right? There's a scene where they're in Professor X's is a Cerebro, that big mind machine, right? And he's telling Wolverine to put the cigar out or he'll convince him that he's a little girl and have Jean Grey braid his hair or something like that. Same idea. Can you convince yourself that you're a little girl or a different core identity or a different species or have wings and can fly? Sure, you can do that. Magic can do that. Should you? No, not unless you want to unintentionally jump off a roof and turn into a ketchup splat on the sidewalk. So, your subconscious doesn't believe you can become a millionaire overnight. You actually can, but generally that magic doesn't work because it shouldn't. And there are good reasons it doesn't. Reasons you probably shouldn't mess with. Even highly experienced magi know enough to put stopwatches when they do that sort of magic. Deadlines, element and temporal physical limitations on those sorts of castings. Because obviously, if nothing else, if you're good at your craft, not setting limitations on resource magic can very quickly result in you being consumed by it, either by materials or materialism. Maybe all you have time for becomes opening gift after gift after gift after gift ad nauseum if you don't set a limitation. And that's pretty useless if you spend every minute of every day doing that and never get to enjoy or employ any of those resources, those gifts, those gains, because all you have time to do is accept them and unwrap them. See, the circle always closes. Beware what you ask for. Humility, wisdom, balance. Such is the way. These are the keys. It would also be unfortunate to have so many Porsches come at you so fast that they squish you and you're dead and then you can't drive them, right? Think Midas, literally drowning in, starving in gold. King Midas. Everything he touches, right? It's gold. It's useless. He can't eat. Do you really want that to be you? Didn't think so. Hence why your manifested reality already doesn't allow for it. Self-preservation at the subconscious level, it's not a bad thing. You can willfully and in a meaningful way go right ahead and lift a lot of the unnecessary restrictions your mind has engendered into your reality. But I wouldn't go lifting all of them or expecting yourself to ever be able to lift all of them, especially if you've been doing magic less than 7 or 8 years. You just don't have the power yet to do that sort of thing, which is why no $1 million check the next day after you sigil cast for it. The magic didn't fail. That's the answer to your question. It's just very difficult to convince yourself that it's possible, especially early on. And that's not the worst thing in the world. I rarely do resource magic myself anymore, which is why I rarely talk about it inside the magic lessons. I have resources I did within the second year of practicing high-level occult training, right? It becomes one of the easiest, fastest things that you get a handle of. So it isn't the most useful pursuit of my craft now. And that will likely be you if you continue on the path. And you have to remember, a big part of casting, spell, or sigil casting is in setting and then forgetting. So to answer the second question, right? I set my spell, I do it once a week. If you're doing it once a week, it's not working because you do it once a week. You have to be able to fully accept and then forget that you asked for and are manifesting $1 million. And that is very difficult. That's tough to pull off. That'd be a tough spell not to hold anxiously in anyone's mind. I know maybe 2 people, maybe 3, far, far more honorable, skilled in the craft than myself, who would maybe be capable of such a thing. And even they'd probably have a tough time with it. And I'm no chopped liver myself. So it's not an easy thing to pull off. You might want to consider, when doing your money magics, to do them far less frequently. Maybe 2 to 4 times a year at most. Most neophytes, they start in with money magic or love magic. Painful magic, really, love magic. But when they start in with money magic and then keep thinking about it, keep doing it over and over, like it needs a constant feeding at the zoo in its priority cage in their mind, in their consciousness, the magic can't work if you can't release it. Forget it. Let it go. And how can you not be thinking about it if you're doing the spell over and over once a week? See, that doesn't work. So I'd suggest doing it way, way less if you want to have a more powerful effect or any meaningful effect. Also, very often, it's much simpler to consider what you want the money for. That's a big part of the equation. Actually going to the root of what you're casting for universally. Money is ubiquitous. Money in and of itself is palmfuls of cheap, mostly inert metals and fiber in paper form. Maybe it's a piece of plastic, right? It's a trade device, a means to an end. It's the procurement middleman. Skip the middleman. Go to the source. What is it you want the money for? Think about it for a second. The money isn't what you want. So do your magic for that thing instead. Smaller circuit to close with far more emotional weight that's very easily harnessed to the energetic tasking. It works better. Need a car to get to work, right? That's why you're asking for money. Cast for the vehicle or for the costless transportation itself. Don't even be specific about the vehicle instead of the money to buy it. And remember, sometimes it's the helpful person who suddenly offers you the free carpool rides that knows the nephew that has a car to give away for free to you, and you haven't met them yet. And if you don't accept the humble opportunity of the costless transport the universe offers you because it was the simple magic to do and ask for, you don't always get to that branch in the path further down the road that leads to you manifesting the new free wonderful car being given to you exactly the way you would have originally done the magic for it. See how that works? So do money magic less. Ask instead for what you need and actually think about what it is you need and why you need it. And always be open to energetic opportunity. You can't always see where the road is leading you. None of us can. The most experienced adepts of the occult, we get good at it. But the universe is vast, right? So harmony and acceptance, gratitude and appreciation, that will open countless doors that you may have been unknowingly nailing shut. I see that sort of thing a lot with neophytes, because they're so set, so focused on one thing that they actively work against their own magic by trying to fulfill that one thing, right? They work against their magic fulfilling itself. They'll do a great, powerful, sometimes incredibly powerful magical ritual because they have a wondrous emotional naivety when they begin. And then they'll stand in the way of their own magics by refusing to follow the manifestation that occurs, the manifestation of that ritual magic. Simply because although they had all that wonderful emotional and energetic intention and this wonderful, powerful ritual, they don't yet have the experience to then trust in its fulfillment. So be mindful of that. Consider the use of the owl, seahorse, capstone, pomegranate, honey, symbolically in your workings, or aspects of divine wealth, such as Abundantea, right? Roman goddess of, you guessed it, abundance and luck. Lakshmi, Hindu goddess of fortune, of money. The goddess Fortuna of fortune. Horus of Egypt. Sai Shen of Chinese folk religions. Odin for wealth. And of course, always Jupiter for largesse. But don't be capricious unless you want the emblems and influences to be capricious with you. You have to know what you're using, know why you're using it, authentically attribute and honor whatever and whomever you're working with in your craft for it to work properly. Right? You have to romance your magic. Thursday is the best day for resource magics. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. And do a purification ritual of some kind before doing your casting. I have someone asking, how can I improve my money magic? So that can be as simple as a warm, relaxing bath with purification salts, herbs, soaps, while meditating actively on all the negativity and pessimisms and lacks that you're focusing on, rinsing off of you and washing away down the drain. I know shamans who use sage smokes rather than taking the time for a full water bathing or full symbolically baptismal cleansing. That works too, if you have the ability and experience for it. If you can do both, do that. Whatever you can do to get inside that headspace, that emotional readiness for your ritual, for your casting before you even begin, that's going to help you in your ritual magic. It's going to help your magic work best. And remember what I said about Merlin, Gandalf, John Dee, Rasputin, Dumbledore, right? I said I'd return to it, so I'm returning to it. The bigs aren't running around grasping at gold coins. I'm certainly not. The most incredible resource magics are those that serve others or higher potentials. Like everything else in magic, there's good reason for that. You don't need hundreds of fish and loaves to feed yourself, and your subconscious mind knows it. So that's a difficult type of magic to access. Gaining access to enough emotional inspiration to manifest that for yourself is going to be difficult. But accessing genuine emotion to manifest the same to feed crowds on a hillside that are hungry, that's far easier, as it should be, because the rationality of that makes perfect sense to the subconscious mind. Remember the 5 senses, the 5 points of the pentagram, fundamental in magic. So if something makes sense to your subconscious and is easy to access emotionally without you trying very hard at all, that is a much easier and more powerful form of magic to call on. Look to the respected kingmakers, right? That's what John Dee was. Well, queenmaker in his specific example, but Rasputin, same thing for the czars, and Merlin with Arthur. They're examples of what is possible when you approach your magic wisely. And they're not doing a lot of money magic, right? They don't work for the self. It's not for the self, but for the whole, or for a greater, higher, maybe more divinely inspired intention, right? That the most powerful magician serves. Not for the self, but for the whole. because we are the self, which is the whole. There is deep magic in seemingly small kindnesses as well, in the tiniest aspect of nature herself, and near endless, meaningful, useful, empowering paths to be followed in the pursuits of the magician in those things. That's where the most experienced magi spend their time. Money, like everything, is dependent upon the physical plane in a temporary form, right? So money, like every dependent thing, anything that is dependent here in the material plane, is temporary, fleeting. Because it's fleeting and easily harnessed energetically, it's the easiest type of resource to gain and use however you want. Once you have more useful tools in your belt, important tools, far more incredible tools, like willpower, intelligence applied wisely, empathy, emotional intuition. Heck, base level auric reading is going to be a much more useful skill set for you than money magic. Resources are necessary, sure, they are, and there's nothing wrong in having them. But be mindful that there are many forms of resource. By all means, use magic willfully and humbly to have what you need, and sometimes that's money. There's nothing nefarious in a life well lived. But don't forget the very real, far more powerful, and far less temporary resources that magic can also give you if you take the time to ask for them. Until next time.